us off in at number 10.
And I'm menaced the Commonwealth.
Okay, you're in contempt again. You've already been held in. You're in contempt again.
We have Leon Montgomery, who is facing a 30-year sentencing for the death of a newborn baby. He was freaking out at the judge, saying he was innocent and he deserves a new trial. Leon was waiting for his new trial for a few years. He finally got it. When he received 30 years, that's when he started to freak out, and the judge gave him an additional 6 months for freaking out in court.
What y'all doing here is wrong to people.
And that'll be 6 months to serve when you finish serving.
No, 6 months. I got 30 years. Everybody here get.
Control yourself. I'm going to remove you from the courtroom.
And you know what? I'm not sure if I believe that the judge should give an additional 6 months for this guy freaking out in court, because this guy's life just flashed before his eyes. He got 30 years. It's really hard to just stand there and just, take the punishment calmly. I think the judge should have just sentenced him quickly and dismissed him, just send him right to prison right away. But then again, this man committed murder, so why go easy on him? He didn't go easy on the victim, did he?
Again, has shown zero respect for the law, no remorse for killing a child in this case.
Number 9, we have 32-year-old Robert Hodge, who is a father of 3. Well, he appeared in front of a judge and his family while being sentenced for murdering his 3 children. He strangled 2 of them with a belt. One of his kids was just 7 months old. And Robert also tried to kill his wife. I mean, is this real life right now? How do people become so messed up that murder is on their mind? So the clip I'm about to show you guys is from a courtroom in California.
Julie and Lucas are gone.
Robert begged the courts for forgiveness, but luckily the judge said the court does not forgive him and will give him a life sentence if he pleaded guilty, so he pleaded guilty. If he didn't plead guilty, he would have been given the death penalty.
Rob, to be a good man before this horrific event, he wanted him to know that we all love.
Okay, moving into number 8.
I do accept the responsibility for what I've done. I know I was in the wrong. But I want you all to know that that is not me. That is not me. That's not.
So that person freaking out was actually 20-year-old Notorious, who decided to drive around yelling the N-word. And she was also threatening people with the gun, including children. Well, those acts was enough to charge her with street gang terrorism. So she was sentenced to 15 years behind bars. Hopefully 15 years is enough time to smarten up and realize what she had done.
I forgive you. I forgive all of you. I'm not a mean spirit like this. I do.
Alright, moving into number 7. And this clip is actually of a father freaking out during a sentencing of a convicted killer. Let me tell you guys the backstory. Van Terry is the father you're about to see. He attacked convicted sex offender and murderer Michael Madison in court. And this is after he murdered his daughter Sherelle Terry. This took place in Cleveland, and it's really, really sad. The father was detained, but hopefully he wasn't arrested, because this is a very difficult situation to stay contained in, to stay, calm. The father was probably in court during the whole trial, listening to all of the details about how his daughter died. Okay, moving into number 6, we have this young guy who was just given a life sentence for murder. From listening to the court tapes of this guy, it seems like fire was involved with this crime, because you can hear the judge talking about burn patterns. Well, at the end of the trial, the judge sentenced this young man to life in prison, and this guy just bursts out crying. And of course, he's begging for forgiveness, and then he falls to the ground in total shock. And at number 5, we actually have a judge who freaked out at a convict, and you know what? I couldn't believe it. Professionalism was just thrown out the window.
You know, if this was a death penalty state, you'd be getting the chair.
I'm kind of glad that this judge freaked out. I wish judges act like this more often.
You gutted him like a fish in that apartment too. You were relentless. You stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed until he was dead.
Times like this, it must be very hard. It must be really tough to be a judge. I couldn't imagine hearing about all these brutal crimes day and night.
Do what you have to do.
I agree with the family. I hope you die in prison as well.
Well, I guess we know where this judge stands when it comes to the death penalty. And I want to know, where do you guys stand? Do you believe in it? Are you guys against it? Let me know in the comment section below. At number 4, we have Mr. Jones, who is in court accused of murder. While he was in front of the judge, he decides to act like this.
Like it?
I don't know, sir. I don't have any idea. I just ask that you answer my questions. Are you currently employed?
I'm really afraid for that officer right next to him. I'm afraid for her life because Mr. Jones thinks he's a vampire and he's about to strike another person. Whatever state this is in, the death penalty exists. This guy's freaking out, but in his own way that I can't even describe.
Do you want to be screened for an attorney?
I don't care.
Mr. Jones.
And you know what? I think this is why you should say no to drugs, kids. Because you would end up like this guy, Vampire Man. A convict launches himself at the victim's family is up next at number 3. Into chaos in Wisconsin after convict man Andrew launched himself into the audience. The victim's family was sitting in the first 2 rows. Police officers quickly restrained him. They then tasered him to bring him under control. Andrew was convicted with 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide in the death of Greg Peters and his girlfriend Jennifer Lewick, who was actually a police officer.
Go! Taser! 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 Let's go!
A convicted man being pepper sprayed in court is next up on our list at number 2. So for this one, we have a convicted killer who was in front of a judge while getting sentencing. He decided he didn't want to listen to the court's rules. He has his own set of rules in mind, so police officers had to restrain him.
I know that that is something that is reserved for the most serious of cases, and I believe that this case rises.
After restraining the convicted man, he still wasn't cooperating, so the police officer takes out her pepper spray and tries to restrain the convict. You have to watch this. And finally, at number 1, we have a confessed murderer who collapsed in court after an Ohio judge sentenced him to life without parole.
4 defendants serve a term of life without parole. As to count 4, for the offense of attempted murder.
Smith Riley collapsed to the floor.
The Ohio Department of Corrections, mandatory and consecutive underlying offenses. All those counts are consecutive each other.
Starting off this list, number 10, with the mother and daughter's desperate plea. An 18-year-old teenager was sentenced to 20 years in prison after she used a dating app to set up a robbery that resulted in another teenager getting shot. When the judge handed down her sentence, the girl's mother dropped to the floor, crying out of extreme grief. The teenage girl was screaming for her mother and begging the judge to give her a lighter sentence. And oh yeah, I have a video clip of this. Watch. Headbanger comes into number 9. Brandon Spencer is serving a life sentence for opening fire at a Halloween party store, and this took place at the University of Southern California. He was charged with 4 counts of attempted murder, and this is his reaction to his arraignment.
21-year-old Brandon Spencer of Inglewood bangs his head as a judge sentences him to 40 years to life after he was convicted of shooting a rival gang member at a 2012 Halloween party on the USC campus.
Number 8 brings us to 2 females who freak out after receiving a life sentence.
Be sentenced to the State Department of Corrections for a period of life. You will get credit for any of the time that you've served. That will be
These two women collapsed in court after they were both handed life sentences for the death of a 3-year-old girl. Shortly after the judge read their sentencing, they fell to the floor with emotional outcries and they had to be wheeled out of the courtroom. Okay, moving into number 7, definitely unlucky number 7 for this one. Jaleel Hoskins pleaded guilty to second-degree murder after tampering with evidence after he violently murdered a mother of 5 and dumped her body in a trash dumpster. When the judge ordered him to serve a life sentence without the possibility of parole, he threw the podium towards the judge and he had to be dragged out of the courtroom by the deputies. Take a look at this.
I love you, Mom! No! That's what you get!
Man fights with deputies comes in to number 6. A 19-year-old received a sentence of life imprisonment after he shot and killed another man in an attempt to rob him. The convicted killer was still hopeful that he would at least get the chance of parole, but when the judge said that parole was out of the question, it sparked an aggressive outburst. You guys won't believe this. Take a look. Number 5 takes us to a man threatening to kill the judge. I mean, come on. Is this real life right now? During his trial, Juan Rodriguez was being convicted of murder for stabbing a nurse at a mental health facility. Instead of making any last-minute pleas, he threatens to kill the judge if he didn't let him out of jail, like as if that was going to work.
Listen to me. You don't let me out of here, I'm gonna kill you. I'm a Jew. I'm gonna take your life if you don't let me out of here. Okay? I'm done.
Yeah, that's probably not the smartest thing to say to a judge who literally has your fate in her hands. A 19-year-old man went into an aggressive rage after a jury sentenced him to death for a murder, and this comes into number 4. He began knocking down chairs before he was tackled by dozens of courtroom officers who eventually dragged him out of the courtroom. Take a look at this outburst. Stun gun shocks its way into number 3. Andrew Worth was charged with first-degree murder after he shot and killed a police officer. His bail was set at $1 million, and after the judge sentenced him, this is how he reacted. The officers had to use an electric stun gun to calm him down before they carried him out of the courtroom. Okay, moving on, number 2 brings us to Michael Marin. After he was found guilty of arson and almost facing a life sentence behind bars, he placed his hands over his mouth and swallowed something. A few minutes later, he began gagging and he died in the courtroom. A toxicology report discovered that he had poisoned himself with cyanide after he heard the verdict of his sentencing. This is insane.
Appears to swallow something after the verdict is read. Notice as he reaches down and appears to get something from his bag. He then wipes his face, swallows something, and appears to swallow again. But 8 minutes later, Marin starts convulsing and collapses.
A violent man makes its way into number 1. A judge sentenced Marshall Iguana to 40 years in prison for aggravated assault after he cut his niece with a butcher knife. After he heard the sentencing, he used a thin blade from a safety razor and he slit his own throat in an apparent suicide attempt. He did survive and he'll probably receive more time for sneaking contraband into the courtroom. Okay, let's get right into this one. And at number 10, we have a teenager freaking out asking for mercy.
The haze of the drugs has worn off as I matured and seen the lifestyle that I thought was cool.
That is cool kid David Morad, who should actually be starting college, but instead he chose a different path for himself. A path that doesn't have textbooks or professors. Instead, David Morad will be confined to 4 cold walls for a very long time. He is in prison because of a burglary that was almost turned into a homicide. David Morad broke into a home with duct tape, a gun, and a hatchet. It seems like theft wasn't the only thing something on this teen's mind. Murad perhaps was going to torture people, which is why I don't believe in this kid's tears, or I don't care about his mercy he's asking for. He's just crying because he's got caught with the crime and now he's going to prison. So he's sorry that he got caught.
Hard to see, to look at what I've done and who I am now.
Number 9.
Everybody want to know? Yes, I did kill her!
That is a very scary mother. That was Mitchell Blair, who has been accused of killing 2 of her children and stuffing their bodies into a freezer. She was seen with many freakouts in court, yelling at people, cussing them off, and being very violent. You can tell that she's living with a ton of hate. It's so crazy how the bodies were found. Blair couldn't pay rent, so her belongings was removed from the home, and that's when someone found the dead bodies of 2 children in her freezer. Blair also showed no remorse in what she did. She admitted that she would do it again in a heartbeat if she had to. At number 8, we have a religious man freaking out at a judge.
One thing to tell you, Judge, and that is that only Jesus Christ can judge me.
Yes,
alright? You judge people as if your tongue is a gavel, and you prosecuted a lot of innocent people that—
I'm pretty sure this isn't the time to be preaching whether you're right or you're wrong. I don't know who can judge you, Jesus, God. Well, yelling at a judge is a horrible idea. The judge was very calm during this whole outburst. A police officer had to step in and turn off the microphone.
I'm gonna let you do the same to me. You're not even thinking, my friend.
Yeah, leave him there, but just shut that off.
Moving into number 7 with John Freeman, who just got a 22-year to life prison sentence for killing 5-year-old Isabella Tennant. Well, this is his reaction right after he was sentenced.
I'm so sorry to all that family, but nothing can take away from that. I understand that.
I know it's very hard to hear what he's saying, but as soon as he was sentenced, John Freeman instantly broke down into tears. He was absolutely losing it. He was losing his mind. He was saying sorry to the family, but sorry just isn't gonna cut it here. What do you guys think? Is 22 years to life in prison a fair punishment for murder? If you were the judge, what would you do? Let me know in the comment section below. Number 6. For this one, we have a situation that I would for sure myself be freaking out, but for some reason no one's freaking out. So who you're about to see is Keeson Wilkins, who is sentenced to 42 years in prison. Well, he totally passes out in the courtroom.
Your Honor, excuse me for a second. I need some time.
Keeson Wilkins totally just passes out and he fell onto the floor. The judge called recess and waited for Keeson Wilkins to get up because she believes that he's faking it, and then what happens next is totally shocking. Keeson Wilkins has a heart attack. I would be totally freaking out right now. I don't know why no one else is freaking out in this situation. I mean, what is going on? You have a man who's having a heart attack. Well, as I watched the video, it appeared that this man I think he faked it. I think he faked this heart attack. What is going on?
The record should reflect that the defendant is slouching over to the side and acts like he's sleeping. His breath appears to be...
Moving into number 5, we actually have someone who fainted in the courtroom. What you're about to see is very real. It's of Diana Lovejoy, who passed out when the jury found her guilty of murder for hire plot.
All right, new developments in the trial against the woman who hired a hitman to kill her husband. Today, Diana Lovejoy fainted after learning a jury found her guilty.
An emergency medical technician was on the scene and he was trying to help this woman out until the paramedics came and was able to take her to the hospital.
Lovejoy was unconscious for a time, then taken to a hospital for treatment. Court was adjourned briefly.
Next up, you're about to see 32-year-old Robert Hodges, who just couldn't hold back his emotions. He was crying in court as he was being sentenced. Hodges murdered 3 of his children and attempted to murder his wife. He pleaded guilty to murdering 11-year-old Kelvin, 9-year-old Julie, and 7-month-old Lucas. I don't feel a bit sorry for this guy. No idea what was going through his mind, and nothing justifies taking someone's life. It's not important, but his reasoning for the murder was because he had financial hardship. So this guy doesn't have money, so he goes on a killing spree, killing his own family. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 3.
She had signs of both manual strangulation and suffocation.
I'm not even sure why this man is freaking out. He took the life of his wife. She's dead and doesn't have a chance at life. His family and loved ones should be the ones crying about this situation. I hate how these people have little remorse after the fact. How is it even possible to take the life of your wife? There are so many other options. An easy option would be just get a divorce. I really hope this guy is just forgotten about in prison. Now at number 2, we have a very unusual way to freak out in the courtroom, and you won't believe what this teenager did in court. Well, if you guys were able to guess it, that's really weird. Like, how? Well, what you're about to see is a teenager who decided to zip down his pants and he started to pee in a garbage can.
Out, as you see in this video, Webb unbuckles his pants, walks over to a trash can, and urinates in court. The judge had this to say to...
Well, I guess this kid has a ton of time in prison to think about his actions and how peeing in a garbage can is inappropriate. But I guess this is one lesson Justin Bieber can't teach his own kids because he did the same damn thing.
Coolest spot to fish, you know, you'll forever remember that.
Why, kid? And finally, number 1, we have done it again. We've saved the best for last. We have a convict who attacked the one person you really shouldn't attack. So the situation in this Ohio courtroom looks so calm and routine, then all of a sudden, bam, Wendell Hollingsworth jumped out of his chair and attacked his defense attorney, which makes absolutely no sense to me. So not only yelling at a judge is a dumb move, another dumb move is to attack the person who is trying to get you less time in prison. Hollingsworth also attacked a police officer and he was actually able to hurt one of them. Did you guys see that? The officer just dropped to the ground, so I guess the appropriate thing to do in this case is to just start all over again and be smarter on how you bring out this convict. There you go, that's much better. Now that is thinking.
Coming in at number 10, we have Diana Lovejoy. Diana Lovejoy freaked out so hard that she fainted when her guilty verdict was read out in court. The woman from Carlsbad in San Diego was arrested for a plot to kill her estranged husband. Diana and Walden McDavid Jr. conspired to kill Greg Mulvihill. The pair were in the middle of a divorce battle and it all got pretty ugly. The man survived a murder attempt, but Diana was still sentenced to 26 years to life in prison for her crime. Here's the moment the guilty verdict was read out.
After a gun rage, and at the word guilty, you hear a thud, then weeping in the gallery. A reporter from another station is trained as Joy was unconscious for a time, then taken to a hospital for treatment.
That's right, she straight up conked it in court. She was taken away in a stretcher. Coming in at number 9, we have Alexandria Thomas. Alexandria Thomas and her mother broke down during a hearing at the Palm Beach County Jail in Florida. The woman was accused of stabbing her boyfriend to death outside a supermarket in Palm Beach. She was standing before a judge who told her her boyfriend was in a medically induced coma. The woman soon understood how serious the charges against her were, and this was her reaction.
Alexandria Thomas crying hysterically.
As you can see, it was all very intense. Here we have her mother outside of the courtroom, and she's still very emotional.
I know she's very worried about the victim who was her boyfriend, who she loved very much.
Coming into number 8, we have Kay Andrea Cook. Kay Andrea's reaction to her sentencing went so viral that we could not discuss it in this video. The then teenager received 20 years for carjacking in an elaborate dating app plot that ended in the shooting of another teenager. At the time, Kay Andrea was 18, and when she was read her 20-year sentence, this is what happened first. So yeah, that's her mother screaming and crying and losing it. I honestly feel like her mum really set her off, because this was then Kay Andrea's response. Yep, not Neither of them took it well. It was very emotional, and honestly, it's pretty stressful to watch. Coming into number 7, we have Mitchell Blair. 36-year-old Mitchell Blair was a mother of 4 who killed 2 of her children, 9-year-old Stephen Berry and 13-year-old Stoney Blair. She put their bodies in a freezer, so not a great mum. The woman was sentenced to life in jail without parole, meaning that she would never be released. Throughout her much publicized trial, Mitchell broke down with outbursts many times. One example is right here. This came during a custody hearing for her 2 surviving children. She screams she did kill her daughter, getting very irate. She said that the girl had abused her other children, but the court found no evidence of that. She was removed from the courtroom a number of times. Coming into number 6, we have Kayla Ray Norton. So this actually wasn't a life sentence, but it was a pretty long sentence and a fierce reaction. White supremacist Kayla Ray Norton and Jose Torres gatecrashed a black 8-year-old's birthday party with guns and a Confederate flag in Douglasville in July 2015. Now the pair were just part of a wider group, but the group did repeatedly use the N-word to the children. Now this was deemed as racially motivated. It also came a month after fellow supremacist Dylan Roof killed 9 African Americans in a church, so it was a very sensitive time. Anyway, we can all agree that this was awful behaviour from Kayla and friends, and this was her reaction to her 6-year sentence.
Not me. That's not me. That's not him. I would never walk up.
She did seem pretty sorry. She broke down in tears, and she did say she accepted her sentence. The next freakout also comes from regular sentencing, but it is so intense I had to include it. Coming into number 5, we have the Vegas lady who is not done talking. So okay, I know that this isn't a life sentence or anything, but the way in which she freaks out rivals a lot of the freakouts on this list, and I thought you might want to see it. I basically just found this footage by googling woman freaks out in court, so like the details are a bit sketchy here. It seems like this woman has done something dubious in Las Vegas, and she's in court hearing about her crime and the fact that she'll likely go to jail. She tries to explain herself, but the judge is like, shh. This is her reaction to being silenced.
Yes, you are. Let me go. I got kids and responsibilities. Y'all, let me go. Let me go.
Whoa. The leg kicking is super intense. Then, when you think that she's been calmed, she comes out with this.
Respect her all goddamn. Sorry, bitch.
If she wasn't going to jail before, she certainly is now. Okay, we have a lot of recent history lady drama, but one of the most intense and horrifying reactions to a sentence in history comes way back from 1541 at the execution of Lady Margaret Pole. Now this is one of the most gruesome and memorable trials of all time. Check it out at number 4. Poor Margaret was arrested by King Henry VIII and his henchmen. She was brought for execution at the Tower of London without trial, so basically her trial was that day, found her guilty, and yeah, her head was coming off. On the 27th of May, a summer's morning, Lady Margaret proclaimed that she was not going to lay her head on the execution block, and if the executioner wanted to decapitate her, he would have to do it where she stood. He did it, but he missed her neck, and she ran around screaming, scratching, and hissing. She literally spat blood at those who wrongly accused her. Eventually, after 11 blows, she was killed, but it's said that her ghost still haunts the Tower of London today. Coming into number 3, back with more modern history, we have this Dallas woman. Mother Elizabeth Escalona abused her daughter, beating her and gluing her hands to the wall. She was shown pictures of her 2-year-old toddler's injuries. Now the little girl was left near death following her mother's savagery. The 23-year-old woman was sentenced to 99 years in jail, longer than usual life terms. When she's read the sentence, her reaction is very strong.
Penitentiary for a period of 99 years. The sentence goes into effect today. As required by law, you will receive all back time credits. Cancel. Is there any reason?
We can't see her face, but her body doubles over in shock. She cries, but the real freak out comes from the woman's mother, who screams the house down.
Cancel. Is there any reason in law why sentence should not be pronounced at this time? Safely held, to be turned over to duly authorized.
It's actually heartbreaking on so many levels. I'm really glad the toddler survived, if there is any silver lining here. Okay, you're gonna need to prepare your ears for number 2. We have this Miami screamer. This is so intense. A woman who lived in Miami was arrested for killing her husband, a crime that would carry a life sentence. As she meets with a judge in a bail hearing in 2013, she applies for bond, but she is denied. This was her reaction. She is distressed and also scantily dressed. She's wheeled in a wheelchair and she seems like clothing has been placed over her rather than on her. I'm not quite sure what's going on here.
Your Honor, if I may.
Me tengo que ir a la cárcel así, pero mi marido me pegó. Si eres el que me rompió la pierna, por favor, my husband broke my leg. Please, no, don't do that. I have my leg broke.
Anyway, she screams that her husband broke her legs, seeming to confess to the killing, but in self-defense. Seriously, she is screaming at that judge. Finally, coming into number 1, this is one of the most dramatic things I have ever seen in some courtroom footage. We have the trial of Erica Mae Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham. A double whammy and truly, truly sad. The pair were sent to prison for the rest of their lives for beating toddler Serenity Richardson to death. The child's godmother, Erica Mae, and her lover, Shanita, beat the 3-year-old girl, with their defense being, and I quote, "We didn't know what we did would kill her," right? The women caused a courtroom stir. In November 2011, when their sentences were read, first cries and screams are heard as the sentences run out. Then, things get even more dramatic. Both of the women on trial collapse and fall to the floor. The screams, we then decipher, are coming from the gallery from Erica Mae's mother. It's honestly one of the most intense things I've ever seen. The women are attended to by medics and the mother is escorted out by security, but she's screaming out the door. The whole thing is total chaos. We hear another woman screaming, "Get up, Erica!" Like, she's fainted, I really don't think she can hear you. Then as she comes to, she's dragged out of the courtroom on a wheelie chair, and her girlfriend before her was too, and it's all very intense. She's hyperventilating very loudly, and I just want done with this footage.
Okay, so starting us off like we always do with number 10.
By Judge Rebecca Dallett, who gave him life without parole, sparking the outburst.
So that was 19-year-old Sandell Jackson, who appeared in front of a Milwaukee County Circuit judge who was sentencing him. Sandell was charged with first-degree intentional homicide and attempted robbery in the shooting death of a 21-year-old. Sandell pleaded guilty to the felony murder charges. He was given a life sentence, but was hoping for a chance at parole at some point of his sentencing, but the judge denied it, and that's when Sandell started to freak out. And everyone else in the courtroom was freaking out as well. Now at number 9, we have a girl who freaked out so bad, she started hiccuping. Like it was just uncontrollably. And I remember one time I hiccuped for like 6 months straight. It was really weird, so.
The parents testified, has a history of being someone who can be manipulated.
So this teenager, Jennifer Mee, was being tried in court for a murder charge, and she just couldn't keep calm. She was freaking out while being handcuffed. Jennifer Mee actually became famous after that video, and after years, she finally talked about that viral video.
What happened to that sweet 15-year-old girl that we first met?
I couldn't even tell you. I got cased up with the wrong crowd of people, really. Unfortunately, when I started experimenting with drugs, I just felt like I was invincible to everything.
Now she will be facing the rest of her life in prison, and she may not have the opportunity to ever leave. During the interview, she said that she thinks she deserves about 20 years, but not more than that.
Personally, I feel would be fair is at least 20 years. I do, because yes, somebody's life was taken, somebody's loved one, somebody's child.
Your attorney has said now there's less than a 1% to 2% chance of you ever getting out of here. How do you hold on to hope?
I can't put nothing past God, but I've been locked up since I was 19. I can't stop fighting. I have a family that wants me home.
Next up, at number 8, we have 17-year-old Raycelyn Martin, who pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, and this is after he killed his 63-year-old grandfather with a hatchet. Is this real life right now? He was sentenced to life in prison, and during court, Martin was freaking out. And this guy was just shaking. He was so scared. He was terrified of what was going to happen to him. Well, what else do you think is going to happen to you? Yeah, buddy, you're going to be in prison for the rest of your life. Okay, let's watch that again, but I'll slow it down a bit for you guys. It must be a very difficult case because both of his parents testified against him.
And appeared to be listening intently to testimony, occasionally nervously looking down. Tonight we heard testimony from both parents.
Moving into number 7, we have the youngest on our list, 13-year-old Keshawn Mann, who became the youngest person who committed murder in Kent County. Keshawn killed his mom's boyfriend. So after Keshawn's mom actually tried defending her 13-year-old son, the victim's family were outraged and chaos pursued in the courtroom.
That angered relatives of the victim, Jermel Stokes, leading to a scuffle.
The mom was saying that she actually found out her boyfriend was abusing her son and the murder was justified. I don't think that any murder can be justified, and also the mom was fighting for her son to not be tried as an adult. This is a crazy situation because you have this young kid who is abused, and now because of poor decisions, he's going to prison for the rest of his life.
This is a child. Yes, he may have committed an adult crime.
The judge was about to sentence her son, Keshawn Mann, for second-degree murder.
But obviously, after it all comes out, he was treated in ways that I had no clue of. So we can't say that, oh, he was never mistreated.
Moving into number 6.
Court physically shaking throughout the hearing. Then the sentence was read.
So therefore, it's the sentence of this court, Mr. Rose, that you be sentenced to a minimum of 10 years to a maximum of 15 years in prison.
So that was Stacy Rose Jr., who just couldn't believe his sentencing. Rose Jr. was caught up in a fight when 49-year-old Briscoe came outside to break up the fight. He was a father of one of the teenagers. He's also a father of 5 and a grandfather to 3 grandchildren. Rose Jr. fled the scene on foot through the neighborhood, but eyewitnesses was able to tell the police who the killer was, and he was quickly arrested. Outside of the courthouse, Rose Jr.'s mom was freaking out because she couldn't believe his sentencing.
So my son wasn't a drug dealer. They went over there and stole them pills out of his car.
Rose Jr. was very shocked to know he was sentenced for so long. He claims it was an accident. This teen was just shaking like crazy in the courtroom, and he was just crying right after his sentence. Alright, so at number 5, we have someone who isn't even a teenager yet, and she was freaking out. She appeared on an episode of Beyond Scared Straight. I love that show, and I love how they're such bad kids, they get reformed, and then they turn out to be okay kids. But the episode I'm going to show you guys is about a wannabe 12-year-old girl who thinks she's tough. Her name's Ashanti. And this girl was on track, to serve the rest of her life behind bars because she just seems so violent. Who knows what this little girl is capable of as she gets older.
I'm Ashanti, I'm 12, I like fighting, I threaten people, and I'm in the squad.
She's kind of speaking too gangster for me. I can barely hear what the heck she is saying, but from what I heard, she's not afraid of nobody. Well, until she was taken to a prison to see what her life was going to be like if she didn't change. Well, what you're about to see is someone who I've never seen be so afraid of anything before. This girl is just freaking out and just losing her mind, and she's like squealing, I think.
We're getting closer and closer. They are gonna love that hair back here, buddy. Here we go. Ain't no time to cry now, sister. Ain't no time to cry.
Okay, what the heck is even happening? She's just in panic mode. I'm not sure how tough this girl really is. Her tough act just seems to be fake. She's not ready for the real prison world. If she was, she wouldn't be acting like that. Number 4, we have teenager Roxana Silvorsky, who was emotionally freaking out in court while she was being sentenced. Silvorsky pleaded guilty to plotting to kill her family. Is this real life right now? Imagine being her family member and you just found out that this teenager, your daughter, your sister, she was plotting on murdering you. Well, luckily she was brought in by the police before anything bad happened, and now she is serving a very long time in a woman's correctional facility. Number 3, I actually just wanted to show you guys quickly a different perspective, the opposite of someone freaking out in court, and he seemed to have zero emotions while he was being sentenced. I mean, watch this.
It is hereby ordered that you be committed to the Department of Youth Services until the age of 21, and furthermore committed to the Massachusetts Correctional Institution at Cedar Junction.
This kid was just sentenced to over 40 years in prison, and he didn't even flinch. He was just 14 years old when he stabbed his teacher to death. I mean, I don't know, is he freaking out inside? Number 2.
That's an extreme recklessness, and that's intent, that's maliciousness, that's a definition of malice.
So that was 17-year-old Jacob Morgan from Rock Hill, South Carolina. He found himself in court after he was charged with arson and murder connected with his 14-year-old brother's death. Prosecutors claimed that Morgan maliciously and intentionally started a fire. Morgan was so shocked when he was sentenced.
So therefore I am going to find that there is probable cause to charge the individual with the found over 4 general.
His life just flashed before his eyes. He didn't think that he would get such a long sentence. He was charged for manslaughter, so he received 10 years for that, and another 15 years for arson, which to me it kind of doesn't make sense because, well, let's think about it for a sec. 10 years for killing someone, 15 years for setting a house on fire. I mean, I don't know. Finally, number 1. I count at least 20 officers in that room to retain 19-year-old Dexter Johnson. He was sentenced to death, so yeah, he was pretty pissed off.
The jury has found you guilty of capital murder. In accordance with the laws of the state of Texas, this court hereby assesses your punishment of death. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is going to complete your jury service. I'm going to meet you in the jury room.
So Johnson sat down and he kind of let it sit in for a few seconds when he was sentenced, and just a few minutes went by when he realized that there's nothing else to lose. This guy just loses his cool and he just freaks out into a rage. I'm not sure if you guys noticed, but the woman in front just booked it to the floor as if there was like a gunman in the room. She was just super scared. It seemed to come out of nowhere, and luckily there were so many police officers around because you never know what else Johnson would be capable of doing. I mean, he's already capable of murder. So what's one more murder to his rap sheet? Number 10.
I need to kill Oscar. Ashley, I really didn't. I really think I did that. I didn't mean to hurt him.
That was 17-year-old Dylan Shymaker, who fatally beat his girlfriend's 23-month-old son. I mean, is this real life right now? I watched videos about this kid's case, and his lawyers were trying to justify that Dylan has an anger problem. He didn't mean to kill the 23-month-old baby. He didn't know how to control himself. I'm not sure why there are lawyers defending people like this, you know, defending killers. That little baby didn't have a chance at life. What is his lawyers thinking? What are they fighting for?
But there were other dynamics at work there, including my client's inability to either control his anger or frustration and his inexperience in babysitting.
So this took place in Buffalo in the States, and jurors convicted Dylan of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to 15 years to life in prison, which is the maximum punishment in Buffalo. Moving into number 9, we have this girl who freaked out after she was given a life sentence. She was hyperventilating, like So just before the panic attacks were happening, this girl fell to the ground and she started yelling in the courtroom. The woman's family was also freaking out. Alright, number 8.
I gotta wake up every day with that. So, just ask. I'm just sorry.
I know it's hard to understand what this kid is saying, but he's begging for forgiveness. It's a hard video to watch. I know people make mistakes, but killing someone isn't something that society can forgive, or can they?
John, is there anything you want to say before sentencing?
Well, that was 17-year-old John Freeman, who was saying sorry to the victim's family after he strangled a 5-year-old girl to death. I mean, in that moment, was he really sorry? This also took place near Buffalo, and he was given 25 years to life, and this is for a second-degree murder in which John Freeman pleaded guilty to. So when John turns 42 years old, a judge will determine whether or not John is a danger to himself or to society, and if he's going to be released. Hopefully, if he is released, he's a changed person. There are also many people who have served a number of years to life who just don't get released from prison because they're just always deemed as a danger to society. So although you get like 15 years to life, you can serve like 50 years. Alright, moving into number 7, we have this. You couldn't see the guy I'm talking about during this part of the video, but who you're about to see is 19-year-old Dexter Johnson, who is 19 years old at the time, so he raged out in court when he was given the death sentence. I guess he has nothing else to lose. This is what this guy looks like.
Punishment of death. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is going to complete your jury service. I'm going to meet you in the jury room.
All rise.
The jurors convicted Dexter Johnson of capital murder. Dexter was involved in a carjacking, robbery, rape, and murder of 23-year-old Maria Paris. Dexter is now 28 years old and he's still on death row. And right now he does not have an execution date. Although someone is given the death penalty, it takes a very long time to go through the whole process. Do you guys believe in the death penalty? Sound off in the comment section. At number 6, we now have teenager Samantha Grigg, who was charged for murdering a Michigan State University student Dustin Frolka.
Grigg pleaded guilty to unarmed robbery and manslaughter in Frolka's death. The 19-year-old's body was found along I-69 last February. He had been beaten with brass knuckles, robbed.
This case just doesn't seem to make sense to me. 16-year-old Samantha at the time decided to plan a kidnapping to rob and kill Frolka. I mean, she's 16. How do you have these thoughts? She had someone help her as well, and that was 18-year-old Tyrell Bredernitz. So the reason why this doesn't make sense, because it does seem like Samantha had a really bright future. She threw it all away. She was actually a lead singer of her band, and she was actually quite good.
Singer in a band.
Number 5, we have this teenager who, after given his sentencing, turned around and just attacked the people in the first row. I think it was the victim's family.
No, Your Honor. Nothing, thank you.
Yeah, luckily the police was right there to get on top of the situation, to handle the situation before anyone got hurt. Alright, number 4.
Can't, they understand the seriousness of the crime.
Barbeau will almost certainly start his prison sentence at the Department of Corrections, Lincoln Hills School for Boys, north of Wausau.
That was 15-year-old Antonio Barbeau at the time of his trial. This one is pretty messed up, but he was given a life sentence for killing his great-grandmother back in 2012. He was just 13 years old. Antonio and his friend killed his great-grandmother with a hatchet and a hammer. The great-grandmother was 78 years old, and this is just so sickening. Antonio won't be eligible for release until he's 50 years old. The article I was reading about this stated that Antonio's lawyers said the punishment was cruel and unusual. I mean, are they freaking kidding me? There's no way that the lawyer actually said this in court. How does that lawyer even sleep at night trying to get this killer out to the public sooner? The reason why Antonio killed his great-grandmother was for money. It's so sickening. I think the punishment wasn't cruel enough, but that's just my opinion. Moving into number 3, we have an 18-year-old who was sentenced to 20 years in state prison for using a dating app to set up a robbery that resulted in a shootout. In the footage I'm about to play for you guys, I really feel bad for this mother who is just so hurt. Once she finds out her daughter was charged and sentenced to 20 years in prison, she totally loses it. She freaks out, and then the teenager starts to freak out as well. This one is really sad. Watch.
20 years in state prison.
The teenager was then quickly taken out of the courtroom by police officers, and the mother was just left there to cry. She was so heartbroken, and I would be as well if I found out that my kid committed a robbery and guns were used and then they were sentenced to 20 years in prison. It's like you lost them. I'm not sure if she is even able to get out of prison sooner, but she did use a deadly weapon during this robbery that could have resulted in someone losing their life. Do you guys think that 20 years was, maybe too harsh of a punishment for this crime? Alright, number 2.
Saying pull the trigger that killed your son now masturbates to memory. All of you.
Sentencing Lane to life in prison, Judge David Fury said he lacked remorse and had feigned mental illness.
So this guy might look familiar to you guys, and to be honest with you, I don't care if this guy gets left in prison and forgotten about for the rest of his life. So who you just saw was TJ Lane, the teenager who was in front of a judge for sentencing for a school shooting in Ohio back in 2012. TJ was 17 years old when he shot and killed 3 students and injured another 3. Although TJ was a minor at the time of the attack during the sentencing, he was tried as an adult and he was given 3 life sentences in prison without parole. Well, just a few years after the attack, TJ, he was actually able to escape prison. This was just 8 days before his birthday, and he escaped from Allen Correctional Institution in Ohio along with 2 other inmates. He was able to escape using a makeshift ladder. They used it to scale down a fence during recreation hours. One of the men was quickly recaptured, but TJ and another man who was serving a 12-year sentence for aggravated robbery and burglary and kidnapping remained at large. Police conducted a nationwide search and told nearby residents to lock their doors. Eventually, both men were captured, and TJ was then put into a small cell for 23 hours a day, and he stayed there until he awaited for his transfer to a maximum security prison. A prison where hopefully you can't make a makeshift ladder and escape again. And finally, at number 1, we have this scary freakout from a California teenager who was begging to not go to prison. That was 18-year-old Fernando Elgato, who was accused of rape. He denies all claims, and he was freaking out when he was being sentenced because he was actually afraid of going back to prison. For some reason, he thought that if he fought back, he would somehow be released.
Scared of returning to jail, 18-year-old...
I feel really bad for this kid because if he actually didn't do it, he just appeared in front of a judge, he got sentenced, and now he's going back to prison where I don't really know what happens there. I can only imagine.